Neiltathmeok, Yamusquium, Escahomish, Eslewatat. Bowen Ma Quiensna, Chenkumantomia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bowen Ma. I'm the MLA for North Vancouver Lonsdale. And what I just said in the language of the Squamish peoples is, hello, everyone. It's very good to be with all of you here today. And I'm coming to you live from the territory of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh, along with ASL translator Nigel Howard. Now, of course, we're coming live digitally, so I know that a lot of you are coming from other traditional territories all over the province, and in particular, I have two very special guests joining me from the traditional territory of the Songhees and the Esquimalt people, Premier John Horgan and Finance Minister Carole James. Welcome, everyone. So the COVID-19 pandemic affects us all as British Columbians, business owners, community members, all of us. And I know that there are a lot of questions about how and when the province will start to reopen. Premier John Horgan and Minister Carole James are here today to answer your questions about BC's restart plan, which was announced earlier this week. Here's a quick overview of how the next hour of our virtual town hall will go. So first, Premier John Horgan will start us off with some brief remarks, about 3 minutes, followed by Minister James. For those of you who have a question to ask and were unable to submit the question ahead of time, you may also submit questions in the comments section of the live event here on Facebook. Now, over the last 24 hours, we've received about 900 questions, and we've got about 45 minutes for this town hall. So we'll do our best to cover as broad a range of questions as possible, but if you don't get your question answered, please do take your question to your local MLA or visit gov.bc.ca/COVID. That's gov.bc.ca/COVID. Now, we've organized the questions today by theme, the ones that have already been submitted, because I know some of you are also submitting questions live. But of the questions that we've already received, we've organized them by theme so that everyone's question is covered as much as possible. And again, for those of you who are bringing questions in live today, I'm going to try to get through as many of them as I can. So let's jump right in with opening remarks. And Premier John Horgan, why don't you start us off?
Thanks very much, Bowen, and it's great to be here on Facebook Live with Carole James and you and Nigel to talk to people about this extraordinary period of time that we're living through. It was back on March 5th that Dr. Bonnie Henry, Minister Dix, and I had a press conference in Vancouver to tell British Columbians that we were instituting our pandemic response plan. I never thought I would ever say those words, pandemic response plan, but the government of British Columbia has an emergency plan for any eventuality, even COVID-19. At that time, we started putting in place measures to restrict personal behavior. And as the month went on, we started to say to some parts of the economy, we have to shut you down. Things like personal services, haircuts, salons, wherever there was close personal interaction, Dr. Henry directed that those businesses cease operation. Similarly, hospitality, pubs, restaurants, where there's again close interaction, they were ordered to close. And for the past 2 months, those employees, those workers, those businesses have been without any revenues at all to meet their needs within their own personal lives or the success or the viability of their business. Carole will talk about some of the programs that we put in place to complement the work of the federal government to help those people that were displaced. But for the rest of the economy, whether it was agriculture, tree planting, forestry, a whole range of manufacturing and construction, instead of shutting it down as other provinces were doing, we put in place measures to ensure that they could continue to operate safely. We did that by working with a thing called WorkSafeBC, which many of you may have never heard of. But WorkSafeBC has been in place for almost 100 years to make sure that workplaces are safe for individuals who work there as well as for customers. So WorkSafeBC and the Public Health Office, headed by Dr. Henry, put in place operating procedures for those businesses to keep operating. So the impact on our economy has not been as great as it has been on Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, like New York, like Italy, and many parts of Europe, enormous amounts of carnage to healthcare, to families, to communities, was what we wanted to try and avoid. And so far, so good. And because of that, we're taking the steps now to restart our economy, slowly but steadily, bit by bit, bringing back services so people
We're deferring tax payments until the end of September. Everything from the employer's health tax to the PST to the carbon tax to the hotel tax, again, to provide some cash flow and some liquidity to businesses. Commercial property owners, they'll also see an average bill drop. We've reduced an average tax bill by 25%, and best for people. Further, we're opening up our economy for the long term. We've all been patient, as we all know, waiting to get into one of our provincial parks, waiting for our favorite restaurant. I can tell you, I can't wait to be able to hold my grandkids, to be able to hug my mom and dad. Probably getting a haircut will be second on that list. It's what we need to do to ensure
short months ago. But now here we are into May, looking towards the summer of 2020, concerned about our economic well-being, concerned about the social cohesion of our communities, and concerned about our personal well-being as well. So what we've been doing, working with Dr. Henry and her team at Public Health, is to put in place a methodical plan to slowly come back to what will be the new normal. We will not be going back to the way things were in January, far from it. For example, large gatherings are still very much off, not ordered to do so. They made a choice to close down for the well-being of their employees, and also because, by and large, people were not shopping. To rebuild confidence in the economy, we need to make sure that consumers, people, are comfortable when they go into a business that they're going to be safe and the workers there are being protected as well. And we've seen this in our grocery stores and in those retail outlets that have remained open. New techniques of delivering products to the public have been developed. Touchless technologies for payment, picking up groceries on the curb, one lane traffic only down the aisles at the various grocery stores that we attend to. These changes in how we interact with each other are going to be here for the foreseeable future. And as we start to bring on more parts of the economy, like the barbers that Carole talked about, or other parts of the economy, we need to make sure that they have in place guidelines to operate under. And that's where WorkSafe BC comes in. We're creating sectoral tables for hospitality, for restaurants, for other parts of the economy, and working with WorkSafe and the Public Health Office, putting in place guidelines for operation so that customers can be confident when they go into a business that that business is operating safely. The reason we have to go at a slow pace is because the public wants us to do that. Helen, you're like everyone else. Let's get going, but not too quickly.
Thank you so much for that. So our next question is from Holly in Victoria. And I'll read the question, and I think I'll pose this to you, Premier. The question is, I have a child who would love to go back to school. She greatly misses her teacher and friends. How can us parents ensure social distance when they're at school?
Yeah, very, very good question, Holly. My daughter-in-law is a kindergarten teacher. I have a niece who's a teacher as well. And of course, I remember the first day we took our oldest son to school. My wife and I wanted to peek in the window and watch throughout the day to make sure he was safe. That's a natural response for parents to have. But as you know, our public school system is one among the best in Canada, and our teachers, our support staff, our superintendents, our principals work every day in normal circumstances to make sure our children are safe, they're well cared for, and they're learning every day about not just math and reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also how to interact with each other in a social way. We need to make sure our kids can get back to school. It's a joyous place for most children, and it's a joyous place for teachers as well. But as we start to come out of this pandemic situation, we're going to have a gradual return to regular classrooms. We won't see regular classes until September, but we want to see if we can get some kids into classrooms with teachers. We have about 5,000 kids in classrooms now. Those are the kids of frontline workers who need to have their children cared for during the day so that they can be in our hospitals and our residential care facilities, driving our ambulances, providing groceries for us to eat. So those workers have had their children in classrooms for the past month and a half. The virtual learning that's been going on has been quite successful. I've talked to many teachers who are very enthusiastic about that, but nothing replaces being in a classroom with your kids. And so we're going to be putting in place measures. Rob Fleming, the Minister of Education, and I will be making an announcement near the end of May about how we plan to go through the month of June. It will not be a full start. It will not be a halftime start, and it will not be mandatory. Parents need to be comfortable that their kids are going to be safe. We're going to do everything we can to provide that comfort. But at the end of the day, these are personal decisions. Our whole restart plan depends on building confidence. And if people don't feel they're going to be safe, they're not going to participate. The economy is people. People are the economy. That's our focus.
Fantastic. Thank you, Premier. This next question is for Minister James, and it is from Christopher in Coquitlam. Actually, Coquitlam, Millardville. So the question is, in your opinion, what will the long-term effects on jobs and growth in BC be from COVID-19?
Well, there's no question, and thank you, Christopher, for the question. I think we talk about what keeps us up at night. These are questions, I think, that keep all of us up at night. BC, I have to say, is in a very good position when it comes to economic recovery. That's been reinforced by others last week, by one of the international rating agencies as well, to say that we're very well positioned because of our strong foundation when it comes to the economy. But that doesn't mean that people aren't hurting. We saw the employment numbers come out today, and those numbers, although they're large, and people often look at the numbers, they represent families, individuals, business owners, entrepreneurs who are really struggling, who've lost their employment, who've lost their business, who are worried about whether they'll be able to restart. So there is no question that British Columbia, as a small open economy, is going to be impacted just like every part of the country and every part of the globe is going to be impacted as well. But I also have great confidence in the people of British Columbia. I have great confidence in the workers and the entrepreneurs and the business owners who are really getting down to the work that the Premier was mentioning, the work around preparing the plans for each sector, making sure that their business can social distance, physical distance, that they're supporting their workers as well as the customers. So I do have confidence that we're going to see our economy rebuild. There are going to be some sectors, no question, that are going to be impacted tougher than others. Sectors that rely on international visitors, for example. That's going to be a longer time before we see that kind of travel coming back. So I think there's going to be work to do, and we will, and we have started that process around economic recovery. We're working with business leaders, First Nations, people from the not-for-profit sector, because they play a critical role in our communities as well, labor, to be able to look at the ideas and the approaches that are coming forward. Ministers are reaching out to their sectors as well to have those conversations. So all the best and the brightest ideas are going to be welcome as we build that economic plan. But, I'm a proud British Columbian. I'm pretty confident that we're going to see the economy rebuild and be stronger than ever. It's going to take time, and we're going to have to support each other because it's going to happen at different times for different sectors. So I think with that support, with that pulling together that we did coming into COVID-19, I'm feeling confident that we're going to come out the other side as well.
Well, if you're confident, Minister, I'm confident.
Thank you.
The next question is for the Premier, and it is from Liz in Burnaby, and it's on a topic that I'm pretty passionate about as well, public transit. The question is, what is the plan to ensure TransLink is in sync with the restart plan? For instance, to provide a high level of service while also maintaining physical distancing?
Thanks, Bowen, and thank you, Liz, for that question. Fundamental to the restart is ensuring that our public transit system is there for workers so they can get from their homes, from their communities to their workplaces. One of the biggest challenges we've seen in the past 6 weeks is the complete drop-off of use of public transit, whether it be on the BC transit system outside of the Lower Mainland, whether it be TransLink within the Lower Mainland, or even BC ferries to rural and remote and coastal communities and the various islands that are dependent on the ferry system. We've seen a drop-off of 80 to 90% ridership in those areas. And when it comes to ridership, TransLink depends on the fare box for a significant part of their revenue. And so I've been engaging with the federal government, as has Carole, she with the finance minister, myself with the prime minister, to say that if we're going to be putting in wage subsidies for Air Canada, for WestJet, as appropriate as those may be, we should also look at our public institutions, our public transit systems in Victoria, Vancouver, Kelowna, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal. All of these communities depend on robust public transit systems. And those systems are hemorrhaging dollars right now. I'm very pleased to say today, Bowen, that the government has reached an agreement with TransLink to make sure that they're not cutting routes the day that we're asking people to start going back into the economy. But this is going to be another one of those cost questions that we're having to put on the table amongst a whole host of other issues. Oftentimes, and Carole knows this as best of all as the Minister of Finance, managing the public resources is a critically challenging part of being in government. There's no end of the requests for funding. There is a limit to the amount of funding that comes in. And that's why governments make choices, make decisions that are in the best interest of the greatest number of people. We need to have a robust, dynamic public transportation system. We have plans to expand billions of dollars of capital investment in SkyTrain, more buses, more routes, at a time when we've seen a complete collapse of the system. We all need to work together. We all need to be confident that when we get back on the bus or the SkyTrain, we're going to be safe. So TransLink is putting in place initiatives, significant cleaning within the system, regular washing down and sanitizing of the facilities and the infrastructure, and also trying to find a way to ensure that we do not have packed buses, we do not have packed SkyTrain cars. We need to make sure that we're creating the distance and the space. And I think you're going to see, although it won't be mandatory, you're going to see an increasing number of people wearing personal masks, not medical grade masks, but personal masks. I think that's appropriate at this time, but we're going to see, I think, a robust restart of our transit system. And thank you, Bowen, for being such a strong advocate for transit in the Lower Mainland.
Well, thank you, Premier. I know that we've come a long way in terms of prioritizing transit over the last couple, 2.5, almost 3 years, well, 2.5 years. And it's been really, I guess it's been a relief to know that our government continues to prioritize transit even through the challenging times, and I'm grateful for that. Now, this next question, actually, I'm going to go back to you, Premier, so you're not off the hook yet. This next question is for you too. Mazdak has asked this in the Facebook feed. He says, many renters feel vulnerable and want to know, will the ban on rent increases and evictions continue after May 12th? And how will you continue to help renters pay their rent?
Well, certainly we instituted a ban on evictions and a freeze on rent increases for March, April, May, and into June. And so we're going to be reviewing that as we get closer to the end of the month. We are not out of the woods yet by a long shot. I understand the anxiety that renters are feeling. British Columbia is the only province that brought forward a program to get some dollars into the hands of renters so that they could relieve some of that burden on their monthly expenses. The cost of living in the Lower Mainland and in British Columbia is higher than other parts of the country, so that's been a big challenge. But we're working with the BC Housing, we're working with Spencer Shander Herbert, our colleague from the West End, who did an outstanding review of the whole rental sector a year and a half ago, with all of the contacts he made with tenant organizations, Landlords BC. He has been the go-between between government and those entities to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect people. The last thing we need right now is a dislocation in the housing market that will put people on the street, or more importantly, put people out into the marketplace looking for another place to rent. We need to make sure we're paying our bills. That's important. And government's here to help to the greatest extent possible so that we don't have that dislocation in the housing market.
And Bowen, if I could just add,
please.
In fact, we've tried to build our plan to be able to fill gaps. It was one of the principles that we put together when we brought our COVID action plan forward, was to build on the federal initiatives. So people have the access to a number of federal initiatives. We've tried then to put in some provincial initiatives. Still more to come. There will be an increase in the climate action tax credit, for example, for families and individuals. People don't have to apply for that one. That one's done automatically based on your income. If you already get that tax credit, or based on your income, you will get the increase in the credit that comes in July. And so all of the programs that we put in place, whether it's the tax deferrals, or as the Premier was mentioning, as the questioner asked, the rent supplements, we'll be reviewing those programs and services. We'll be watching to see the economic growth that occurs, and certainly looking at what supports are needed in the short and long term. We've tried to build that flexibility into our plan as well.
All right, great. Our next question is from Claire. And given that, well, I think I've lost track a little bit who I've thrown the last question to, I'm going to read it out. And I think that it's probably one that the Premier will want to answer. And the question is, and I'm sorry, I'm looking through all these Facebook questions and trying to find it again. Claire on Facebook asked, if you want people to stay home when sick, what are you going to do about guaranteed sick pay?
Mm-hmm. Really good question. And I don't know, I'm sure that almost everyone who's watching this Facebook question and answer today at some point has got out of bed when they shouldn't have, put on their shoes, got on the bus and gone to work, thinking you're a hero, thinking I'm going to go in with my runny nose and I'm going to get the job done. We can no longer think that way. This is not just a BC problem. This is not a specific sector problem. It's a national problem. So one of the advantages of the COVID crisis is that I've been meeting weekly with premiers across the country on Zoom calls, on conference calls, and joined by the Prime Minister, talking about how we can have a national response to these national challenges. And on TransLink, again, I said we need to put wage subsidies in place for workers that, even though it is a public sector enterprise, we need to support it because it's fundamental to our private sector economy. Similarly, we can't put the burden on companies who are coming out from underneath 2 months of no revenue. We can't then say to them, we need to have a paid sick leave program coming from you. We need to find, I believe, a national response to this. Carole's been working with the federal finance minister. I've been working with the Prime Minister. The unemployment insurance fund, I believe, and Carole believes, is the best way forward. I've been banging hard on that with my colleagues to get them enthusiastic about this. But as Dr. Henry says, we can no longer go to work when we're sick, and we cannot be going to work because we have an economic imperative to do so. If people are masking their symptoms because they have to pay the bills, they're putting themselves at risk, they're putting their colleagues at risk, they're putting customers at risk. That's a national problem, and we need a national solution. We're not there yet, but I'm getting good feedback from my colleagues. The Prime Minister has been working every day for the past 100 days, trying to put together programs to help Canadians. This is a fundamental one, and we're going to be relentless about this because it's a public health question, it's an economic question, and it's the well-being of all of us at the end of the day. We can't go to work if we're sick.
Well, I'm definitely learning that too. I've also been guilty of going to work sick in the past, and that's not going to be something that we can do anymore going forward. So yeah. A good lesson for me as well. This next question is from Michael, and it's also a Facebook question. He asks, when can American tourists come without quarantine for 14 days? And what's next for our borders? That's probably another one to you, Premier.
Yeah, well, it'll be a while, Michael. I'm in regular contact with Governor Jay Inslee in Washington State. One of the big challenges we had here in British Columbia, we were quick to discover that we had a case here back in February, but then we looked to the south, to King County and Seattle and Washington State, where they had a significant outbreak of COVID-19 with a significant number of deaths in a very short period of time. That said to us, to Dr. Henry, to Minister Dix and I, that we needed to make sure that the border was secured. This is not something I would normally be doing. I believe our relationship north-south with Washington, Oregon, California is one of the strengths of our economy and one of the benefits of living here on the West Coast. Progressive people living beside the ocean with a view of helping each other to lift everyone up. That's what we see on the West Coast. I don't want to compromise that. But I also want to make sure that the gains that we've made here in British Columbia aren't relieved because we have a group of people coming from the south of the border to visit spectacular British Columbia. We will see the borders remain closed for the foreseeable future. International travel is not something that's going to be coming back anytime soon, not just because of our situation here in BC. This is an international, global pandemic. Everyone is experiencing what we're experiencing right now, and the desire to get onto a plane and jam yourself in with a whole pile of people to fly to British Columbia is a low priority for most people, and it's going to have a significant impact on our tourism economy for sure. It'll have an impact on our television and film sector because much of the talent, although we have an outstanding infrastructure here, the workforce and so
affordability for workers by increasing the wages. We've been able to do that in incremental steps, provided bursaries to get people into university and college programs to be able to become early childhood educators, because there's hope in that career now with the investments we're putting in and as government. So it's an incredibly exciting time, and I'm looking forward to seeing that do nothing but continue to grow in our province.
And if I could add, Bowen, I know when I first started working with Carole 2,000 years ago, she was a child care advocate. So to be the Minister of Finance in British Columbia, we campaigned in 2017 on child care. We've been delivering on that child care. And one of the silver linings of the COVID-19 crisis here in British Columbia is everyone now understands the importance of child care, not as a social program, but an economic program, and one that gives strength to families going forward in very challenging times. So childcare is front and center, has been in our government from the beginning, but I'm grateful that those in the community that were reluctant to embrace the need to expand this program now see very clearly that it's fundamental to our communities and our families going forward.
And I definitely know that I've been hearing from a lot of parents in North Vancouver, where my riding is, about how grateful they are for the changes that have been made. And I know that
families
more challenged for sure, but they've been in place, as we said, in front of the show today. And those sectoral tables will be giving general guidelines to beauticians, to those that work in the personal services sector, including barbers and hairstylists, on how best to proceed. I think you'll anticipate again, there will be masks involved. There'll be regular sanitation of workspaces and distancing within the shop or the salon to make sure that people feel comfortable. But those initiatives are well underway, and they will be sector-wide. If someone's watching right now and they cut hair or they work in the personal services sector, don't expect WorkSafe to call you up and tell you what to do. Be in touch, connect on the website, look at what your colleagues are doing or your competitors are doing in the marketplace, and make sure you're adapting those initiatives so that customers feel comfortable. But again, we're not prescribing. We're saying these are the general rules for the sector. How do you operate your shop depends on the size of it, the number of chairs you have, and so on. But all of that work's being done right now. WorkSafe BC is there to give the public confidence that there are guidelines in place, and we'll be monitoring that as the economy opens up over the summer.
And I think this comes back again to Helen's question at the very start of our show, where she asked about how can we do this in a safe approach? How can we make sure as we open up the economy, it's done in a way that builds confidence, as the Premier has said? So I think that's really key. We all have a responsibility in this, and this is the opportunity, as the Premier has said, for individual shop owners, individual businesses, whether it's retail or hairstylists or other businesses, to be able to look at those guidelines from their sector, put their own plan together around how they can meet those guidelines, how they can do that in their own business, and then be able to open up in a way that's safe for their employees, as we've said, safe again for their customers, and done in a way that will ensure long-term economic growth.
This was never about flicking a switch. This is about a slow, gradual turning of the dial as we ramp back up to something remotely resembling what we used to do. Every sector is different, every business is different, and that's the challenge we have as policymakers, and also the challenge we have in communicating that to the public. There is no black and white answer here. In some cases, there will be sector-wide truisms. If you're in the business of providing food to people, there needs to be serious sanitation work done, serious physical distancing thought put into how you configure your tables. More outdoor patios, for example, is another big one that we'll have to work with cities on, so that we don't have bureaucratic restrictions that frustrate the ability of a business to get one or two more tables out there to help them with their profit margins, to make sure they can keep people working. So we're all in this together, as we have been from the start, and it's going to take time and patience as we restart our economy.
Well, thank you so much. And it's not just the economy that people are looking to get restarted. I know that there are also a lot of folks who are looking to get back outside to enjoy our wonderful provincial parks. And so Bob from Kamloops submitted earlier this advanced question. He says, getting outside into nature is so important for physical and mental health. When will you open BC parks, and will that come with a campfire ban?
Well, very good question, Bob. The first thing we did after the announcement of the restart was we said we were going to have elective surgeries again. 30,000 people were waiting to get a surgery for a knee or a hip or some other non-essential process. And the first thing we did was get that started again. The second thing we'll be doing is opening up our provincial parks for day use only, on the 14th of May. And as we go through the summer, we're going to see more opportunities to camp. But on the 14th of May, most of our parks in British Columbia will be open for day use. And as you quite rightly say, Bob, physical health, mental health are always improved when we get to spend some quality time in one of the spectacular provincial parks in British Columbia. But I want to reinforce, as Dr. Henry has, this is not the time to load up the Winnebago and throw the mountain bikes on top and travel across BC to somewhere else. Every corner of British Columbia is spectacular. There's beauty in every part of this province. Stay close to home. Take advantage of the neighborhood that you live in. Enjoy that. And as the summer unfolds, we'll be able to open up those restrictions and see more travel across BC.
That's great news. Now, I also understand that not every provincial park will automatically be open on the 14th, but if you are looking to visit a provincial park near you, you can always check the BC Parks website to make sure that you have the current status of the park that you're headed over to, and that's bcparks.ca. So this next question is from Anne in Nanaimo, and she says, my granddaughter is 21 months old and is much too young to understand social distancing. I haven't seen her for 2 months. How can I safely visit with her? And I suppose I'll add also, what do I say to her? And I'm going to start with Minister James, because I understand you're also a grandmother yourself, and you might have some grandmotherly advice on this.
Well, I think it goes without saying that all the grandparents have been aching to hold their grandkids during this time period. I, on a regular basis, have my grandkids over for a day visit or a sleepover on weekends, and it's been very tough. We've been planning what it'll be like when we get to that stage of being able to have them over and have a sleepover again. Kids are resilient. Your grandchild will be just fine through this process. And you will have an opportunity, as Dr. Henry has talked about, to expand your family bubble, to be able to add family members over the next number of weeks after the long weekend by the end of May, to do it in a safe way. Again, if there are members of your family who are have immune challenges, obviously you want to make sure that you're protecting them, because the people you visit with then expand the other person's bubble as well. So it's important to do that in a very, again, measured, careful way. But that time is coming. Certainly Dr. Henry has talked about that as you get to the end of May, that you have the opportunity to be able to have those visits. Start outside. Again, one of the best ways with adding family members is to have visits outside and have a physical distance walk, have a play in the park, have a chance to be able to connect with your grandchild, because those are critical. And I can tell you, I certainly understand the ache that has occurred in not being able to hold those grandkids. We've had our grandson come running for a hug, and that's been pretty tough, I think, all the way around. So thank you for the question, and thank you for echoing the question of grandparents all across our province.
So that was actually our last question. So I thought maybe, Premier, if you had any other final words to say before we wrap up.
Well, thank you, Bowen, for hosting us today. Thank you, Nigel, as always, for the great work that you do for all British Columbians. Carole, always good to see you, even if we're on different parts of a screen. And to all of you out there, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your commitment to each other. We have made tremendous strides here in British Columbia because of the sacrifices that people have made. Those sacrifices, whether it be in the case of the 125 families who no longer have their grandmother, their grandfather, their father, their mother, their brother, their sister, we can't imagine what that is like. But we all know the sacrifices we've made, the frontline workers who every day put themselves on the line to care for other people. We can't let them down by abusing these as we reduce these restrictions, we can't abuse them. Continue to have your better angels shine through. And the last thing I want to say, Bowen, as I've seen, and I said this at the press conference earlier in the week, there is no place in British Columbia for racism and hate. We are among the most fortunate people in the world to be able to live in such a wonderful, diverse, dynamic community with people from around the world. I'm the son of an Irish immigrant, proudly so, but I'm a proud British Columbia, and I embrace all of the diversity that makes up this wonderful place. Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate each other. Be kind, be calm, be safe.
Thank you so much, Premier, and thank you, Minister James, because that was a lot of ground to cover in a short period of time. And I think it's obvious that British Columbians are looking forward to phase 2 of BC's restart plan. So thank you again to both of you for being available to take the time to answer these questions from people all over the province. And thank you to everyone who submitted a question today and who partook in today's virtual town hall, because as we move forward to stage 2, phase 2 of BC's restart plan, we're also going to be relying on all of our neighbors and folks like you who have heard the message from the Premier and the Minister and help others understand the importance of paying attention to Dr. Bonnie's instructions. And as Dr. Bonnie Henry always says, be kind, be calm, and be safe. So if you have any further questions or comments about the government's response plan, please go to gov.bc.ca/COVID-19 survey or contact your local MLA. We're here to help too. So thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good night or afternoon. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks for hosting, Bowen.
Bye now. See ya.